we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So welcome to the Westwood Planning Board meeting. My name is Brian Gorman, and I will be chairing this meeting. The meeting is videotaped, recorded by Westwood Media Center. If anyone else wishes to record the meeting, please identify yourself so the audience is aware. As a friendly reminder, please turn off your cell phone ringers. The meeting will be civil and all people will be treated respectfully. This includes no clapping, booing, or interruptions from the audience. In the event of a disruption, the chair will give a warning the first time, and if it occurs again, the individual will be requested to leave the meeting. The format of the meeting will be when an item is called, the applicant will come forward to the podium to present their application to the board. The board will proceed to staff comments. The board members will ask questions of the applicant. For public hearing items, the public will be given an opportunity to comment. Items that are not a public hearing, the opportunity for public comment will be at the discretion of the board. When it is time for public comment period, the chair will call those wishing to speak to the podium to use the microphone. Please direct all comments and questions through the chair. All people will be given the opportunity to speak. But in the interest of time and fairness, repetitive or off-topic comments may be cut short. And at the podium, the limit will be 2 minutes for each individual and can be extended at the discretion of the chair. Are there any changes to the
Yes, there are 2 changes to the agenda. First is item number 2. This is your continued public hearing for 215 High Street. You continued this hearing to this date back on November 5th. The applicant, you had some discussions, mainly centered around the affordable housing requirement and the applicant's proposal for the off-site affordable housing proposal. Since that meeting, the applicant has submitted a request to you to withdraw the application as submitted without prejudice. The applicant is not here tonight, but they did submit a letter that they ask that I read into the record. So in your packet, you received a letter from Michael Yanoff, the applicant, for the proposal for 215 High Street with the portion on 258 Grove Street. This is the letter dated 12/3/19 to the Westwood Planning Board. I am hereby requesting that the Westwood Planning Board grant leave to withdraw without prejudice for this application, for this petition. We are withdrawing because we have lost confidence in the Planning Board, given their propensity to completely change direction from what had been indicated in the past. On March 20th, 2018, we appeared in front of the Planning Board, which at that time included Mr. Atkins and Mr. Gorman. The resulting board decision gave us preliminary approval for 19 units and specifically expressed support for off-site family affordable homes. Our next Planning Board meeting took place on October 1st, 2019. At that meeting, a number of issues regarding our application were clearly identified and discussed. The specific off-site family affordable units that we are now proposing, and which were already approved by the Westwood Housing Partnership, were included in the Planning Board materials and not once raised as an issue. In fact, off-site affordable housing was discussed at length both in public and in private meetings with board members and the town planner on numerous occasions. Furthermore, we were encouraged to pursue family affordable units instead of age-restricted affordable units, and the only way to schedule the October meeting with the Planning Board was to have these affordable units identified by address, which meant they needed to be owned or controlled by us at the time of the meeting, which we did at great expense. By the time of the November 5th Planning Board meeting, we had committed over $1 million to purchase the 2 homes that had already been approved by the Housing Authority and reviewed by the Planning Board with no negative comments. At this meeting, the Planning Board unanimously switched direction and requested that affordable homes now suddenly be placed on site, despite clear and definite direction from Sarah Bouchard, the housing agent, that she and her board wanted off-site family affordable housing and that our plan was better suited for the town. The board discussion that ensued pertaining to, in the future, adding rules that would notify neighboring homeowners that a home was being considered as an affordable unit was both shocking and discriminatory in our opinion. The notion of shining a spotlight on an affordable family before moving into our town should have immediately been condemned and shut down by the board. The fact that the board could so easily change direction after giving us guidance that led to the commitment over $1 million in home purchases and completely ignore the request for off-site affordable homes from Sarah Bouchard, their expert, was a clear indication that they are unwilling to do what is in the town's best interest and what ultimately would have made this project possible. This project would have brought a positive impact of almost $300,000 a year to the town and would have provided greatly needed homes for longtime residents of Westwood, like me and my partners, that are looking to downsize and stay in the town. Moreover, the bylaws in place encourage the creation of communities like the one we are permitting. Yet somehow all this was lost in this board. In the end, we feel we were misguided and misled by the planning board, and it's the resulting lack of confidence in the planning board that we ultimately leads us to withdraw this application. This is from Michael Yanoff, the applicant. Now, since this is a continued hearing, the board, you do need to vote on this applicant's request to withdraw the application.
Sure. I think first we should do board comments, public.
Yeah,
Vote.
I've thought a lot about the November 5th meeting, and personally, I'm only going to speak for me. I think we did a really bad job issuing guidance to the applicant. I know I did. I'll say that. I won't use the word we. I commented at the very end of my time to comment things that I really didn't believe. I think I said something like, I'd like to see all the affordable units put on this property. That's not how I feel. I believe that off-site is appropriate in certain situations. In March of 2018, I believe the planning board at that time indicated that that would be considered. And I think it's unfortunate that the tenor of that meeting really sidetracked the discussions that were important about the application at 215. That being said, I'm not trying to indicate that I believe this project is would be a certain yes vote from me, but I don't believe I gave it the consideration that it warranted on that evening. I reacted, unfortunately, to the moment in the room, and it's not how I felt. It's not how I feel. And I am apologetic if that led them to tonight's request for withdrawal. I do believe a project like this is a good project for the town if it's presented correctly, if it's done right by this board. I really believe that this request for withdrawal, although it's understandable, is coming a bit premature. I wish that we didn't have more than a month between that meeting and now, because I think had we been able to discuss it at our next meeting on the 19th, we could have done a better job at keeping them interested in this project. So I want to say from my perspective that the applicant was owed a clear head, a clear mind from me, and I didn't do that. And I owe that to the town. Every application deserves to be heard on its own merits, and I failed to do that on that night. Again, I'm not trying to imply that I was for the project as presented at that time. I had issues, but I think they were issues that every application comes with that can be overcome as long as the board is willing to work with the applicant. So I just wanted to offer that apology to the applicant and to the town, because on that night I didn't do the job that I was elected to do, and I am sorry.
Do any other board members, would they like to speak?
Yes, it's been 5 weeks, as Chris pointed out, and I wish that we had the opportunity to address some of these issues, because I've been thinking about it ever since then. I echo a lot of what Chris just said, that I failed to adequately represent the history that I'm well aware of on this project and how hard we'd worked to come to something that was meaningful. And I regret deeply how negative the meeting became, and that in many ways it became a forum for prejudice and fear all around affordable housing. So I'm deeply disappointed in my own failure to adequately represent my true position on this issue, which that I would have supported the off-site housing. And I'm sorry that it had to come to this.
Deb, do you have any?
So I think that the affordability was just a small piece of this project, and there were, I'm not sure that this, the way it was presented, was actually in the spirit of the USRD. So, I just, again, the affordability was just a small component of it. There were a lot of waivers.
And Bill?
Well, when I came on the board, most recently, everybody else had seen this project before, but when I first saw the project and it was presented, at the end of that evening, I didn't think it would be coming back again. There were too many waivers. There was too much objection by neighbors and what have you. So I thought it was done. So I was surprised to see that it came back again, and then other things were discussed, such as the affordable housing and what have you. That being said, I think you get a fair shake from this board. I think there has to be some, you have to talk, do your talking points. You have to, we have to investigate. We're not going to make a decision just like that. We didn't deny this person this project yet, or we haven't approved it yet. So if they wish to withdraw, that's fine. But I don't think there's any need for apology. I think we just needed more information, and if the applicant wanted to come back again, I was expecting them to be back again. But if they want to withdraw, that's fine. But to think that there isn't a little give and take during these negotiations. There will be. But there were just too many waivers right from the beginning on this project that I thought it was going to be a very, very tough go for them. Thanks.
Thank you. So I respect the decision for the applicant to withdraw, but I'd like to add to the record that the letter was selective for information. It's a very challenging project with, again, many waivers. There continues to be significant neighbor resistance, whether it's the first hearing, we heard some, and some neighbors still continue to have challenges to that. We heard the same for the second hearing. And it's this is the open meeting. It's where we're collecting information, meeting to meeting. The peer reviewer also noted significant changes in the plan by that second hearing. But again, I respect the decision of the applicant. Any staff comments?
No further comments at this time. I mean, my recommendation earlier on was I was supportive of the applicant's proposal. As the applicant referenced in their letter, staff had been working with the applicant, and I had recommended they propose family affordable, since we had heard over the last year and a half since a preliminary review that family affordable was needed in town. So I had encouraged the applicant to find these other properties. That's why they had come forward with the single-family home. So I was hoping that would be a strong positive. The original proposal was 2 family affordable and 1 on-site.
Okay. And any comments from the public? Seeing none. So we can move forward with the motion.
I make a motion to accept the applicant's request to withdraw without prejudice the special permit and consolidated EIDR application submitted for 215 High Street.
I hear a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? So the motion passes 5-0. So I'd like to make so that was one change to the agenda.
I just wanted to
Sure.
not forget about that. The second
Oh, and then
one.
closing.
Or,
We need to close the hearing also.
yes, actually, you should close that hearing, yep.
So do you want to
Make a motion to close the hearing.
do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? So the hearing is closed.
Right, and I just want to make that clear in case anyone in the room is here. The 215 High Street application has been withdrawn. And then you did receive a second request, a change for the agenda,
85
item
Burgess.
5. That's the public hearing for 85 Burgess. That's the earth material movement application. That applicant notified me today, the board requests to continue to your next meeting on January 7th. That's at 7 p.m. at the library, because they'd like to make further plan changes that would require another revision submission to you. So you should vote to open and continue that hearing to January 7th at the library, 660 High Street in the community meeting room.
Make a motion to open and continue the hearing to January 7th at 7 p.m. at the library in the community meeting room at 660 High Street.
And do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? So that's it. I'd just like to make one other motion to move the zoning article discussion to follow the comprehensive plan. Is there a second?
Second.
So there's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? So that's just to move up. So we're all set to start at the comprehensive plan. So item number 1 on the sheet is the comprehensive plan update.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Thank you for having us again. There are members of the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee here this evening to continue our presentations of the draft updated sections of the comprehensive plan. And obviously the purpose, as it has been in the past weeks, is to solicit comments from the board and the public on the draft recommendations that we'll present. Tonight, it's our intention to cover land use and housing. Linda Walsh, myself, and our liaison from the planning board, Chris Paff, worked on the land use section in collaboration with our town planner, Abby McCabe. Barbara Shea and Sheila Hanley-Longville are responsible for the housing element in collaboration with Abby and with Bill DeLay as the planning board liaison. I would point out, too, that there's a number of members of the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee also here this evening to hear this out. As you know, so I'll begin with the land use section. As you know, each of the updated sections begins with a background section, but these presentations are really focused on the draft goals and recommendations. But with that being said, I would mention that Westwood's land use pattern is really fully established, as had been pointed out in the 2000 plan. And this notion is nicely captured in our regional planning agencies, the MAPC's classification of Westwood as an established suburb, whose characteristics include predominantly lower density, owner-occupied single-family homes. We're approaching build-out. We have very little vacant land, and we have a stable population. That is, we're neither losing population nor are we experiencing or expecting explosive growth. A large number of recommendations from the 2000 plan has been carried out in the intervening years. The zoning bylaw changes to stimulate mixed-use redevelopment in the University Avenue area and the town centers, with the objectives of revitalizing the commercial areas, generating tax revenue, diversifying the housing stock, improving public spaces in ways compatible with the existing town character. Open space has been preserved through regulatory review processes and the efforts of the Westwood Land Trust as recommended in that plan. New opportunities have been created for needed housing types, as will be discussed in more detail in the housing section. Keep going. This next image is just the detail of the draft land use map, and it was created by our town's GIS department using assessor's data. It's still being refined. We're going over some of the categories, and the data used to prepare that map is also reflected in the table in the background section of that land use plan, which will also undergo some minor revisions as well. So let me move on to the draft goals and objectives for the land use section. The input received from the community during the planning process informed the goals relating to land use, which include preserving the small town character, community character, especially in the town centers and in the established neighborhoods, protecting natural resources and open space, expanding housing options, improving community cohesion, and maintaining fiscal stability. Most of the recommended implementing actions which follow in the land use section reflect and support recommendations made in other sections. So some of these will sound familiar to you already, and you'll hear some of the others in the sections that will be presented later. The land use section really captures all of the, in a sense, all of the recommendations and attempts to make them work together. So the first set of implementing actions are categorized as general, and I'll go through them quickly. L1, foster a greater sense of community by better connecting destinations within the town with alternative transportation options serving pedestrians, bicyclists, and with shuttles. L2, supporting zoning reform. There have been bills throughout the last 2 decades proposing to reform the state's zoning and land use statutes. Massachusetts is almost unique in the country for not having updated its zoning statutes, and there's been attempts to do that for some time. You're hearing, I think, a little bit in the press now about the governor's housing choice bill, which is, for the time being, has replaced the land use reform movement, but should that broader bill go forward, it would include things like changing the votes that are required to amend zoning bylaw, for example, or potentially allowing a majority vote for special permits rather than a supermajority and that kind of things. Also provides additional tools that the town could really use to help guide its development, such as the ability to use impact fees and those kinds of things. L3, municipally owned property, not otherwise committed or preserved as open space, has great potential for serving a number of needs depending on its location, its size, and character. For example, the surplus school property that we may come about would be a good example of that, or other underutilized town property. Next set of recommendations relate to housing. L4, continue to prioritize flexible density-based residential controls, such as the open space residential development and the flexible mixed-use overlay district regulations to better guide new housing and allowing a more diverse, a greater diversity of housing types, as has been done over the last 10 years or so. So the plan recommends continuing that. Review approved open space residential development projects to determine if the process or the standards could be improved. We often don't do that. We created the OSRD probably 10 years ago and have been implementing it since that time. It would be valuable to go back and look at what was accomplished through those kinds of reviews and see if there's a way that we can improve either the process or the standards. L6, we heard a lot about the need for more moderately priced housing, starter homes, senior housing, and that sort of thing. This recommendation identifies several different options that could be explored. Smaller home lots, for example, increasing the number of 2-family homes, that sort of thing. L7, similar intent to the previous recommendation, explore incentives and regulatory provisions to preserve and expand moderately priced or starter homes. This can include more attention to regulating of tear downs or financial or regulatory support for building smaller homes. Next set of recommendations have to do with commercial development. L8 to L10, 4 recommendations, promote the objectives articulated by the community in the survey and in the visioning session. For our town centers, focus on pedestrian-friendly, community-oriented design featuring gathering spaces for the public. Encourage commercial properties to maintain quality and feature local retail services and especially restaurants. Develop design guidelines and a design review process for commercial development throughout towns. Now, generally, when that's done in a community, each type of center has a different set of design standards. So the 2 town centers would be different from the Route 1 commercial area, which might be different from any new development in the University Avenue area. L11 in the Glacier Everett Business District continue to encourage a mix of retail, office, and residential uses. As you know, that we applied an FMUOD to that property. There has been a considerable amount of redevelopment there, but there is still a lot of property, and the town has always been promoting among the property owners there the idea of working together to create a mixed-use development. Finally, in a category of open space and cultural resources, the community has been very supportive of protecting open space. L12 suggests this desire could be reflected in the town's long-range financial planning by dedicating some amount of funding for open space acquisition or protection. This was a recommendation in the 2000 plan to systematically fund an open space acquisition through capital improvement programming. This allows the town to respond when suitable property becomes available. And I think of a couple of situations, such as there is property in town that is classified under the Mass General Laws, chapters 61, 61A, 61B, which are open space taxation designations. And those programs do give the town right of first refusal should those properties should the owner choose to change the use of those properties. And that's the kind of incident that the town would need to be ready to make a serious proposal to acquire those properties if we wanted to do that. L13 finally reinforces as a recommendation from the 2019 Open Space and Recreation Plan to collaboratively identify open space, scenic, natural resource features in the town worthy of protection. And so I'll leave it at that. Those are the recommendations that are currently in the draft plan, and I'd like to invite questions or comments from the board.
Dave, do you have any questions or comments?
I don't have anything yet. I'm curious what other people think.
Deb?
I don't think there's more to be heard, right, in terms of the housing and,
Housing's next, yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I don't have anything for land use at this point. Chris?
Nope.
Bill?
Not right now.
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman. Now, Barbara and Sheila, I don't know who's going first.
Yeah, and why don't we do public comment for land use at this point? So seeing none. You can go.
Hi, I'm Barbara Shea, 14 Cardinal Drive. I grew up in Westwood. I raised my children here, and I'm a realtor in town, just by way of background. First, I'd like to thank Jack and Abby for all their work in coordinating the meetings and working with all of our subcommittees, and plus facilitating between the various boards and departments in town. I'd also like to thank Sarah Bouchard for her work and helping to give Sheila and me background data for our section. And I'd like to congratulate her for completing and getting town approval for Westwood's first housing production plan. In fact, I'll quote some of the data from that plan. So, I will give you a quick rundown on housing highlights since the 2000 comprehensive plan, and then Sheila will go over goals and implementing actions. Am I talking loudly enough? Okay.
Seems fine.
So on this slide, on the right-hand side, you can see, oh wait, it's not slide one, is it? Yes. Okay. So the land use in Westwood is 59% residential. Since 2000, there have been just over 100 single-family homes built, and there have been many more multifamily units added, including at Highland Glen in 2006 and 7, and then the big blue line on the right-hand side is the units at University Station, which was 350 rentals and 100 ownership, which was mostly due to zoning incentives like the open space residential design and the flexible multiple use overlay district that Jack mentioned, to encourage denser development, which did result in denser development. Also, as a result of the overlay district, 6 apartments were built at the Colburn School, which are now being sold as condos. 30 apartments in Islington have been built or permitted, and additionally, 40 age-restricted condos were permitted at the former Westwood Lodge site. Those aren't on the chart because it's only up to 2017. Okay, so currently Westwood has low vacancy rates and homes are renting and selling quickly. In 2000, the median sale price was about $400,000, and in 2018, it was about $800,000. Next slide. The chart on the right here is a little hard to see, maybe from a distance, but it shows the age distribution of Westwood, and you can see that we have a much lower population of people aged 20 to 39 and under age 5 than the state average, and a higher proportion of people aged 40 to 60. We have a total of 598 affordable housing units of the 5,389 total households in town per the 2010 census. That's 11.1% affordable as of the 2010 census. And I'm glad Sarah's here because I might have a question. So I understand from Sarah's housing production plan that 12 new affordable units have been added in 2019, and 17 more have been approved and are pending construction at the Westwood Lodge site and in Islington. Are those part of the 598, or those are?
Westwood Place homes, and that's reflected in that.
Okay. Which is the 12, and then the 17. Oh,
Or do you want me?
sorry. I
so
wasn't sure if
the
my number
ones-
was right.
The
and I was
ones
gonna
at the
call you.
lodge
Yeah,
are
yeah.
not included yet.
Yeah, so the 12 units that were added to the SHI in Islington and the 321 Washington Street building are included in this 11.1%. Also included in this 11.1% are the affordable condos at Westwood Place on University Ave. What's not included here are any of the units permitted through the 45 Clappertree Street application on the former Westwood Lodge property, or anything that's happened since then.
Is that the 17 or no? I took that from your plan. I
Yeah,
wasn't
that's
sure.
okay. So that
Okay.
17 includes some of Westwood Lodge. It includes one comprehensive permit from the Habitat for Humanity home. So there's a handful of others that have not received their building permits yet, but are approved by permit. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yep. All right. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. So any special permit housing development must provide 15% of the total number of units permitted in affordable housing units in order to offset the by right developments, which I'll define, which are not required to provide affordable units, so that we can maintain the subsidized housing inventory at or above 10% per the Massachusetts law. So by right development is building that's done within existing bylaws, such as the 10-unit development at Hedgerow Lane, and they're not required to provide affordable units. And my last slide is the fourth one. So Sarah did a lot of outreach for her housing production plan in 2018, including a survey and visioning session, and our committee also did a survey and visioning session in 2019. As relates to housing, our survey respondents voiced concern about cost, with over 20% indicating that they are cost burdened. Many reported that aging in place is challenging due to taxes and maintenance costs, and downsizing is difficult because of the lack of smaller, more affordable homes for them to move to so that they can stay in town but have less property to maintain. Many participants in the visioning session felt that Westwood needs more moderately priced housing, and there was discussion about ways to support more housing diversity through accessory apartments, condominiums, apartments, multifamily housing, cluster developments, and/or senior housing developments. Sheila's going to go over the goals and objectives, which are very similar to those in the 2000 plan, and she'll also outline our draft implementing actions.
Thank you, Barbara. I'm Sheila Henley Longville, 24 Willow Street in Westwood. I was on the comprehensive plan with Barbara. 20 years ago, correct? So anyway, so we're revisiting this, and I certainly learned a lot along the way. I do also want to thank Sarah for her work on the housing production plan, because that gave us a lot of information. What we tried to do is be very reflective of the comments that we heard at the housing production meeting in Downey School, also the surveys that were done, as well as the visioning workshop. And I really want to make sure that it reflects the input of those residents who express their interest, their concerns or recommendations for the future planning of Westwood. One of the things that Barbara mentioned was that lack of demographics from 20 to 49, and there's the concern about how do we have entry-level housing in Westwood to encourage people to come into our town, and also the concern about seniors aging in place, but also their need for assistance with maintenance, tax relief, and so on, and that we do have a high percentage of residents, higher than the state average of senior residents. So I think those are important things to consider as we move forward. I can barely read this slide. I don't know if you can make this bigger for us, for me. But basically, we do also echo some of the recommendations that Jack has made in his land use report. I won't read all of these things, but okay, here's a bigger. Okay. I'm just going to paraphrase some of them. One of the things we talked about is housing stock, increasing the mix, providing moderate priced homes, rental units, and so on. This has also been mentioned in Jack's report already. Housing opportunities for diverse community, again, for providing moderately priced housing so that younger families, single-headed households, housing for elderly, young singles, and so on will be available in Westwood. We seek to increase the racial and ethnic diversity of the community, and we would accomplish these goals by the following. We encourage private development of affordable housing through zoning incentives and negotiations with individual developers, and consider housing as a possible use when municipality-owned parcels become available. And that's been mentioned a few times. What do we do when these properties become available? There's many polls for what we might be able to use if we were to get a school offline. And the other one was we were supporting the housing production plan and the work that Sarah has done, and we have included those goals and actions in our plan as well. So this one was just to provide information to residents for energy efficiencies, certainly would help with costs, and promote energy efficient alternatives for new construction as well. Funding programs to achieve the universal accessibility and available in new housing. Identify creative ways to supplement the aid to the elderly and the disability tax fund that we currently have. And then these are the goals that are related to the housing production plan for affordable housing. And most of those are really A through C is working with developers, private property owners, and so forth to work and provide those opportunities for more affordable housing, or to maintain our current status right now. Oh, I'll go to the bigger version here. So I'm going to have to.
These were the zoning. H5 were the
H5, I
zoning
am going to be right
related
there.
changes.
Yep. So this H5 was more options for a greater range of housing that came up in Jack's report as well in all zoning districts and neighborhoods. Identifying, prioritizing town property as it becomes available for use. The accessory apartment bylaw has a cap of 2% of housing units, and consider looking at that and perhaps removing the cap. Consider zoning revisions And that's the,
Upper Story Residential Overlay District, and the FMUOD is a Flexible Multiple Use Overlay District.
right,
That's
so
what
in
those
High Street,
acronyms
to
are.
include additional commercial properties and to encourage redevelopment, including permitting upper-story housing. I know there, another concern in residents was increase in traffic, so of course, that would have to come before the planning board and some kind of traffic mitigation. Something would have to be discussed in terms of that as well. The density bonus in the
OSRD is the Open Space Residential Development
Okay.
bylaw.
and to incentivize and attract developments. And this was an interesting one because we have something right now in place to encourage developers to do some of this work, but no one really has taken
has-
advantage of the density bonuses.
The zoning right now does have a density bonus for providing affordable and moderately priced housing in the OSRD, but we haven't had anyone take advantage of that or any interest or anyone asking about that since it's been created.
Right. So we have to look at that one for sure. Potential for small lots and smaller single-family housing. That came up so often about the need for smaller homes, affordable home. When we say affordable, it's not the same affordability in terms of the housing production plan, but it's the idea that people can come into this town, have an entry-level home at a price that they can afford. Investigate potential zoning amendments to encourage, and this one, the last one, is something related to the starter homes and the tear downs, and that we have some zoning amendments in place right now to make sure that houses are following the housing.
Zoning compliance with dimensional and setbacks.
Right, presently, which is something new, and want to make sure that we sort of monitor that, but also investigate potential zoning amendments to encourage the preservation of smaller and more moderately priced housing and homes. I think that's, I'm still on. And, let's see. And so these other ones are related to the Westwood Housing Authority, working together with, we have a nonprofit, Westwood Affordable Housing Group, and sort of to encourage that these two groups work together, and that we encourage fair housing training, that we strengthen the role of the housing partnership, and that this has been in a few of our reports, study the benefits of adopting the Community Preservation Act, which provides funding for historical preservation, open space protection, and affordable housing development.
Thank you.
And Barbara and I welcome your questions, comments, or suggestions.
Dave, you want to start with you?
You're always asking me to start first.
Well, you're right there. Oh, I'll start. So I have a few comments. One is on H1, just to make sure that for housing that you link up with the sustainability section, because they might have similar language, but I think that's nice. Then H5A. Of course, this is talking about like what happens to the land as we develop other town-owned land. I would imagine that other recreation and such are going to be looking at that. So you just may want to look at the language that you state here, where it's more, I guess, flexible.
Open, right.
But I do think it's a good point. And yeah, that's those are my comments. Thanks. Dave?
All right. So a couple of things, like I think it would be a good idea to consider something like promoting a welcome wagon sort of idea. Like, so what can you do when people are new people in town? There should be a goal of figuring out things to do that are welcoming to people and connecting to the community. That could be a part of the housing plan. I know Dedham did something like that for a while too. And
I like that
And,
idea.
well, I've had many opportunities.
Everything can be looked at, right?
I think it's
improved upon,
probably covered in other parts of the plan, but I think emphasizing the promotion of transit-oriented development, it's because of one of the big advantages of Westwood is the accessibility to work in the city, but increasingly that's becoming problematic because of the unreliability of the T and whatnot. So, but I think that there should be some element of the housing plan that is around making it, recognizing that transportation is critical. So things like shuttle services could be helpful to get people to the train station from their home, promoting development around Islington Station, and University obviously has its own stuff going on. Even consideration of future transit lines and things. I just think the housing is an integral part of transportation issues. So I think I would emphasize that.
That's what the FMUOD is all about, though, right? Kind of concentrating
Even more than that.
issues, including housing around.
Yeah,
the
it's
station where the train is, right? I mean, I think that's an accomplishment of the FMUOD.
I don't think it specifically mentions transit-oriented development in the FMUODs, but I think they were organized around that kind of an opportunity. And then I would support the H6, that you didn't go over that, but to establishing a policy and procedures to guide
Oh,
regulatory
yes.
boards
Yes.
in their consideration
that
of
was
inclusionary.
That was a big one, yes. I'm sorry that yes. Yeah. Yes.
It should be possible for these boards to approve proposals to make it possible for a family to buy a home in Westwood. That should be something that these boards can just approve. That should not require the detail of the location. It should not invite a public discussion about that some people would think it's inappropriate. It's all about solving the overall problem of unaffordable housing that exists in every neighborhood. And so I think we do need some policy and procedures to insulate specific properties from becoming the topic of discussion of regulatory boards, including the planning board.
And Deb?
So I think you touched on this a little bit about the bylaw in place to prevent the tear downs and to make it more difficult to increase nonconformity. Have we ever tracked that? Do we know if it's effective?
There is no bylaw to prevent tear downs.
It was,
It was to prevent the increase in nonconformity,
Right,
to
in
help
2000
prevent tear downs and to,
in 2017, I think it was, we changed the non-conforming structures section of the zoning bylaw to tighten that up, to make it harder for non-conforming properties to become more non-conforming. And the intent was, as Sheila summarized, was for zoning compliance. Before, the zoning was a little more open to, if you were non-conforming, it was easier process to continue pushing out to those setbacks.
effective?
So I think it's been 2 years now. I'm looking at Sarah. She's also the zoning agent. I think we have not seen many variance requests. So when applications come to us to begin with, staff, the building inspector, Sarah, myself, we encourage them to go the special permit method, which means redesigning their plans so that they fit the setbacks. So we think it is effective. It's only been in place for about a year and a half now.
Okay. Also, too, in the write-up, it talks about town meeting voting in an affordable trust. So it wasn't, a trust, I believe, is different than an account, which is what we voted in at town meeting. So you might want to just verify the wording on that.
Okay.
Because Mass General Law has,
I probably said the wrong thing, but
Yeah, it's in the whole write-up.
it's in the, right, it's in the whole
Yeah,
write-up,
right,
correct.
okay.
Correct. Just to make sure that we have
The right wording.
the right wording, correct. And then just on H7, if we could find a stronger word than encourage, those 3 units really should be on the SHI. So, stronger word than encourage just to make it happen. But other than that, thank you. A lot of time and effort went into this.
And Chris?
I'd like to echo Dave with regard to H6. I think we really do need to put forth some type of procedure for, as we saw what happened on November 5th. It's really not a place to discuss the specific things like addresses at this board level. That's really our housing agents' expertise, not ours, and things like that. So I do want to reiterate what Mr. Atkins said. And reading the section on affordable housing and then listening to you present it, I want to make sure that when this document is finalized, that the tenor of discussion around affordable housing is more of, it's the right thing to do. We're not doing it just to comply with the state. That's kind of a side note. I just want to make sure that the writing reflects that attitude, because that's the attitude of the town, as I understand it. It's certainly my attitude. I'd hate to chase a number, and that's why we're doing it. So I'd like that sentiment to come forth in the writing somehow. So I just want to make sure of that. And then, well, I appreciate the goal and objective of coming up with entry-level housing. It's a real difficult Rubik's Cube through zoning to accomplish that. I'm not saying it's impossible, but a town like Westwood, if you want to sell your house, you want to get as much as you can. And it's really hard to then say, okay, now we want it affordable for the 25-year-old couple to move to town. So it's really difficult to do that through simply zoning alone. I'm not saying we're not up to the challenge of attempting that. It's just a really big hurdle to get over.
100%.
You would, yes.
But,
you would
but then I
understand.
have the other point of view where, I'm in a smaller home, and I really do want that to continue to be available for young families. So it is something that we all have to wrestle with, because we're not going to, that demographic that's not here in this town, 20 to 39-year-olds, I mean, that's sort of the lifeblood of our community and our planning for our schools and so on. So we really have to think about how do we kind of address the housing needs of.
But it seems like to do that, you're artificially keeping down the value, because you're appreciating all that's happened in the last 20 years to our home's values. And when you want to go sell it, you can't help but your sale price is going to reflect that, increase.
I have made money on the house.
I
We all have.
I
We
get
all
that.
have.
I get that, but it's.
So I guess it's like, yes, I understand,
It's-
but
it's a difficult
it's this thing
problem
where
to
we
solve.
kind of, yeah.
It's simply just done for this board through zoning. I mean, that's really the only way we can reach into this problem.
Be able to.
Other aspects of town boards and government can reflect some other attempts, tax incentive, whatever. So I just wanted to make comment on that. It's, we recognize that need, but it's a really difficult thing to do.
Well, I think the attempt of the zoning amendments to change, to make things that were in the maze, for example, which is where I am, you had, the tear downs, and you had the big houses that the setbacks weren't adhered to, so they didn't follow the zoning regulations or zoning compliance. And so that's a step in the right direction as far as I'm concerned, because it basically says we can't, they're smaller lots, and smaller houses are
Right.
designed to fit into smaller lots, and that helps to kind of provide, again.
Yeah, I agree. It's a good first step.
Yes. Yeah.
I would just comment on the 20 to 39 demographic. Those are the kids in college or just out of college who don't want to live in Westwood. They want to live in Brighton or
Right.
Charlestown or something.
Yeah, and that's the other
And
aspect
the
of it.
leaders' formation of households is not unique to Westwood. It's
I'm curious.
It's happening. People are getting married later, having kids later. They don't
Yeah.
want to move out to the
I think you
suburbs,
probably
so
find that in
they're
similar
married
towns
in
like
third world.
Needham and
Yes.
Newton. You'd
It's
find
true.
the 20 to 30, for 39, they're just not aspiring to live in the suburb where they grew up as much.
But then you have, my two sons who would move back if they were able to afford it. So it's, you've got all of that. You have it all going on. So,
Yeah.
Yes, it's all in the mix.
Bill?
Yeah, under H5, I guess, we were talking about, well, we mentioned non-conforming lots. And what I don't want to do is discourage a family that has moved in and a couple, and then they have a growing family, and they live in a neighborhood and they like it there. And they want to expand their home, and they want to stay in Westwood, and they want to stay in that neighborhood. I don't want to have them leave Westwood because they can't afford to stay in that neighborhood. So, they may want to expand that house. And I think they should be allowed to do that and stay in the neighborhood, and stay in Westwood, and keep their children here if they like the town. I don't want to force them to go to Needham or what have you. I'd rather have them stay.
They won't, they're not going to go to Needham now.
All right.
Less
But-
affordable than Westwood.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, but they'd leave here and go someplace else, and they have a growing family, they like Westwood, and they're a good asset to Westwood, and they have maybe, they grow older and their grandchildren come to Westwood. But I just don't want to make a law that would prevent people from staying in Westwood and forcing them out.
So you're saying if they're in their home and they want to stay, but they need more space?
They need more
You don't want to
space.
prevent them from being able to
Right,
add on to the
yeah.
home, which they're not prevented as long as they meet the dimensionals.
Right.
Yeah, and sometimes they may need a,
And they can even add an accessory apartment
That's
for
right.
their growing children or their
Right.
aging parents. Or
but
the
sometimes you need a
parents.
variance in order to do that, so that the house may not be in our neighborhood. I don't think any of the houses are within the setbacks, so if someone added to it, they'd be making a non-conforming house more non-conforming. But they may like to stay in our neighborhood, it's very convenient. It's convenient to the train station, it's convenient to the highway, and they may want to stay there. So I'm just saying that we got to make sure that we don't force people to make a decision to leave this town. That's one thing. Under H6, where we talked about affordable housing. 50 years ago, I was in town meeting in Lexington, and we had low-income housing come in. Today, everybody still knows where that low-income housing is. I don't like it when government hides things also. So you're going to make people suspicious of what's going on. I mean, you can go to the registry of deeds and find out how much a house sold for anyway. I don't want to make it a scarlet letter, and I don't want to make it a big deal when someone buys an affordable house. But I can tell you what all the houses on my street sold for. And, one sold for $450 and one sold for $850. I don't feel any different about the $450 people than the $850 people. And there shouldn't be any discrimination along those lines. But then again, I hate it when the government tries to hide things from the general population, because the general population sometimes thinks that something's going on behind their back. So you just have to kind of watch what you do when you make a law that hides things that are going on in town. And other than that, that's it.
Well, we're not suggesting a law. We're suggesting your board and other boards collaborate in establishing a policy. So
As long as
that
everything's
meeting
upfront,
that
yep.
happened on November 5th never happens again. It was an embarrassment to the town that what happened that night, in my opinion. And I'll stop there on that one.
So are there any comments from the public? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so next on the agenda are zoning amendments for annual town meeting. So I think we had one sheet up with the ones that we had identified at the previous meeting. And then as far as the timing for this, so if you look at the dates, we have planning board meeting on January 7th and then the FinCom meeting on January 14th. That's all right. I mean, we can speak to them.
It's doing an update.
So the first item that
You should be able to get it in your,
in the packet, yeah. So I think the first one had to do with gun shops in town. So this was a topic that Dedham had dealt with. So it is true that the applications have to go to the ZBA, but they're allowed in multiple districts. So the idea for this zoning amendment would be to evaluate the locations and then potentially remove. I believe that they're allowed in highway business, local business on High Street and on Washington. So we need to, the idea was to look at where those locations are and to potentially make a change to that. The next one had to do with the exclusionary language for the bylaws. So essentially, there are some towns that include a statement for which the idea is to protect the town from items that are not listed already. It doesn't solve all the issues.
right, you might be able to add some language that talks about uses that are not defined.
Exactly.
So essentially to make it
Exactly.
a prohibitive zoning bylaw. I'm sorry, I must have hit the wrong button and it shut down the computer.
That's fine.
Do that part.
The next, okay. So the other one had to do with short-term rentals. So this is an issue that a lot of towns are dealing with in the state. You see week to week that there are articles in the paper about this. So it has to do with short-term rentals and how does Westwood want to deal with that. So currently we do not have any bylaws that would speak to short-term rentals.
You currently have under accessory uses, you allow the renting of rooms by a resident owner on the premises. But it doesn't, it's not specific to timing. So you
Right.
would have to look at what you're trying to do and you'd have to expand the existing zoning if you want to look at timing, because we
Yeah,
don't
and
have
it's hard to
anything.
police that. It has to do, you can't have more than 3 people that are non-related.
Yeah, I think ours says no more than 3, renting of rooms to no more than 3 unrelated individuals.
And so what some towns have done is they've limited it to where they've said that the short-term rentals have to be at least 2 days or at least 5 days, things of that nature. The next one, so we have here is Article 2, which is related to the fire station in Morrison Park, and that's that if you look at the zoning map, those are included within the FMUOD. So it would be amending the zoning map so that those two structures, those two plots, would be more consistent with other zoning. So that's more of a cleaning up the zoning map for that. And then medical uses. So we dealt with this back in the spring, and we weren't able to come to a conclusion on that. So the medical uses, and we've just saw on the previous application where the doctor's office, it seems like the town is not protected where you would be able to do infusions using the doctor's office as a use. The Route 1,
The Beth Israel.
Beth Israel, exactly.
Right. You don't, currently in your zoning, you don't have definitions for a hospital use, a medical center or clinic, and a substance abuse rehab treatment center. So the zoning articles you had looked at before was trying to create those definitions and
Right.
then identifying where they are and are not allowed. So that was changes to the definitions and changes to your table of uses.
And then the last one is that at least we had collected is a type of zoning article related to energy efficiency. I don't know if that was Bill or Dave.
Yeah, that was a placeholder for potentially suggesting things like perhaps requirements on solar or building efficiency requirements or other things that I haven't enumerated yet.
And I think we should look at particularly municipal buildings that we're building, that they don't leave a carbon footprint, that we really work on that.
Or requiring an energy assessment of buildings.
I mean, I can't believe that we did Westwood Station and nothing down there was required. But so I would think that we want to really take a strong look at making sure that things are energy efficient in the future.
Well, all of University Station was solar ready, so all the buildings are designed to support roof solar. And Target does have solar on their roof. So
Out of all those buildings.
So why don't we, so Abby, from a timing standpoint, so January 14th is the first FinCom meeting.
yes.
So at that meeting, what would we need to provide to them?
Well, they've already asked for your articles.
No, but what
they-
happens on January 14th?
So I did submit to the select board for their consideration on the warrant. They'll close the warrant at the first meeting in January, which is usually January 6th. Your meeting's the next day on January 7th. The FinCom holds their meeting on January 14th. That's an initial review. So they'll usually ask for a summary of what you're proposing.
Okay.
You sort of had to know kind of what you're proposing to be able to summarize it. Your language should be in a good draft form. It's not in its final form yet, but you need to have enough information so you know what changes you will be proposing pretty soon. January 28th and January 29th, those are the FinCom's next set of meetings. Those are where they ask the article sponsors to come and present or kind of summarize the proposal also. It's not the official public hearing yet, but they want to hear from you. And usually by this time you have the full zoning article language because it will be in the newspaper for your public hearing. The planning board also has to hold your own public hearing, and you usually have that your second meeting in February. So you usually have it out to the newspaper around end of January. And then you'll hold your hearing. Right now, your second meeting in February is February 25th. And then from there, there's the FinCom's public hearings. They have two sets of public hearings. That's in early March. March 2nd is a Monday, and then they continue the following night to March 3rd if it's not concluded on that first night. So that's those are the meetings where you all attend and you give your recommendation to FinCom after your public hearing. And then they have a second set of public hearings at the end of March. It's March 23rd and March 24th. If they don't finish on the 23rd, it goes into the 24th. So that's their second set of public hearings to respond to anything that came up during the first set of public hearings.
Okay.
So the warrant's still open, correct?
The warrant's still open.
I actually would like to propose two more.
So what are those?
So I was thinking of, for another article, to impose an affordable housing requirement on subdivisions or developments that have maybe 10 or more units to help stay in compliance with the 40B. That was one of them.
You mean by right developments?
Well, but it'd have to be a certain amount of units, not just one house. But if the building permit was for, say, so many homes, that number yet, I don't know. And the second one was to impose a temporary moratorium on residential development and zoning changes until the 2020 census numbers are in. Since there's such a concern about the 40B compliance. A lot of towns are doing that, so.
So what is the moratorium on
Residential.
residential?
Mm-hmm. And then have an end date as to once the
But the town meeting would be May. and that's when it would get passed.
Right, but the numbers aren't going to be out till, when I spoke to Sound DHCD, till around 2021, he said. So,
Okay. And then, Dave, do you have any additional warrant articles that you were considering that you'd like to bring up?
Well, I'm curious, like, so just sort of how we're going to do this, like the process-wise, if, like, we're going to write them ourselves and bring them to the meeting on 1/7, and that's our last chance to get it right, or how?
Yeah, what
town
time?
council should be able to help.
I would think that we
Town council.
probably have to do it here at a meeting here and there. Obviously, we have to talk.
But we just have that
Sure.
one meeting here, now, and then January 7th.
Well,
Is one
on
we-
January 7th, we're probably going to have to hold a lot of things aside and talk about these warrant
Yeah,
articles.
But when you do a petition article, you bring it before the town council, so he should be able to help with the wording.
And maybe you can come to the meeting.
I mean, I'm not recommending any zoning changes at this time because I think you have the workload. There's still a lot to do on these articles, and I think with your workload with the comprehensive plan and other projects that are coming before you, I don't think you have enough time to bring a fully fleshed out article in time for these upcoming meetings and this schedule. So I would think you would need to, at your next meeting on January 7th, you would have to have the language pretty much drafted. So you would probably need to be, I guess, on your own, working on the language over the holidays and come prepared on January 7th for all of you to review it together. That's at your next meeting.
So on January 7th, can we, what do we have already on the agenda for January 7th that we've already committed to?
You have the earth material movement,
Burgess.
Burgess, and then open space, a couple small applications. I think you'll have time on your January 7th meeting.
Right,
You
but I mean, we
can-
need to be able to talk amongst ourselves here.
Yep, so-
So I would, and I'd like to see Consul here, if we can have him here to help us.
I think that Abby has identified a real issue, and that is bandwidth and time. The reason we haven't updated our comprehensive plan since 2000 is first was Westwood Station, and then it was University Station that occupied this board's time through the decade of the 2000s and 2010s. Right now, we have some momentum going with this comprehensive plan, and I'd hate to see it not get its due attention because we're looking at some zoning articles that, other than the medical uses and maybe the firearms, don't appear to be time sensitive to me. I don't see why we have to push this through for the May town meeting. It just doesn't strike me as something that's urgent while being done concurrently with this comprehensive plan. We don't know what applications may come down the pipeline in March, February, that are going to require our attention in addition to this. I think Abby has hit the nail on the head in that we don't have the time to vet out all these things. And we don't look good if we go to FinCom or the Select Board with zoning amendments that have not been vetted out. And it undermines our credibility as a board when we do this kind of at the last minute. And here we are in December 10th, and we need this done in a month to essentially write a bylaw. And this just doesn't strike me as the best way to write a law for our town. So I would echo Abby's sentiment, and let's hold off, especially those things that are not time sensitive. And maybe look towards a fall town meeting if we're going to have one of those as a town to pursue any other zoning amendments.
I think we need to do these warrants. And I think we proposed the warrants for the fall town meeting that were put off to the spring. So this is our time, and I think it's incumbent upon us to put it
So-
together and get it done.
And so, obviously, the town council will be reviewing these, I would assume. So when I look at these articles, they don't seem that complicated to me. And some of them have already been before us. So why don't we go through each one now to see if there's any general consensus on who wants to work on this before and then the idea would be that you would bring that to the January meeting in a fleshed out area. If they're not ready for FinCom, then they get dropped. I think what happened last year at FinCom is the can kept getting kicked down the road for one particular one, and it just went, and that was irritating. So if that was going to happen, I would just pull it before it got to that point. So when we go through the article, so Deb, do you want to work on?
You want any public input?
We're still talking here, but we will after, yeah.
I'll do the Morrison Field and the other two that I just proposed, so I'll do those three.
Debbie's doing what now?
And then I've already done some work on the short-term rental. And then prohibitive language, that's just a statement, so I already have that statement.
And a lot of these have already been done in other towns, so you can certainly research those and use the same language because they've been passed by the AG's office.
And then the firearms, that's essentially just it's the table that shows where the locations are.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just a matter of we need to decide. So right now it's in local business B, local business A, industrial, and highway business. So the question to the board is, the most obvious one to me is, do we remove it from the local business areas? So that's the question that we have.
Right, like that could be a very simple one.
That's what I mean.
Say,
Yeah.
take out the,
Right.
because it's already defined, fortunately. So
Exactly.
It's just a question of whether you want to take something out.
And then medical uses. So this was a bit of work had been performed on this last year. So I can pull the definitions and work on that. I mean, we had talked about that. And then it's a matter of where we would put this on the zoning map.
Yeah, I think with that, you could go back to, so what we ended up last year, we had kind of taken out the substance abuse rehab centers thing, and we were trying to come to something that just included medical uses. But I would say if we're going to address this, we should go back to the original thing that was passed at town meeting and address the concern there was by putting it in the ARO that it was, that was the problem that most everybody had with that. And so, but we kind of got stuck on, well, you got to put it somewhere. But one idea was to put it into a overlay district. So, for example, and then that would require redrawing the zoning map, but that would be a way to constrain it. So I guess.
Yeah, because I was looking at that map even today, and you can create an overlay that's big enough so that it's possible to build. I think there's a concern that if it's not large enough, then it's not. Then it shows that you've created something for which can never happen. So I will take that forward, the medical uses, because a lot of that work has already been done as far as the language, and then we can talk about it on January 7th. And then the last one that we have printed out here is the energy efficiency. So is there anybody that wants to look into sort of what to Deb said it all up? Some towns have already dealt with these items.
I'll take that. I'm not sure how many, if it's one thing or if it's multiple things. So I heard efficiency, requiring solar panels, requiring potentially energy audits of buildings maybe. Bill, what else were you saying?
Yeah, well, municipal buildings.
Yeah, so town-owned land, something that we have control
I'll take it,
over.
or I can work on it, and then.
My only hesitation, is that it might be better to pass a resolution first at town meeting that sets a larger goal, like to say that the town supports going to a carbon neutral or a 100% renewable energy by 2030 or some kind of, to pass a resolution first and then.
Well, I know we have a couple of buildings possibly coming up, new school, maybe a new fire department. I'm not sure about town hall or what have you, but we should kind of focus in and, you know, say that when we're doing these things, we'd really like to have something with little or no carbon footprint.
So, Bill, you have an idea, so why don't you work on what you're thinking?
Okay.
And then, Dave, it sounds like you have some ideas. And you may also want to look into that.
If there were a resolution, Abby, is that something that, that's not really planning board? Like, that would have to be an individual thing, right?
I'm not sure about,
Yeah, when's the last time the town passed just a resolution on something?
I'm not sure.
All right, so I guess
Okay.
all right, I'll come up with something then.
So it sounds like we have a plan for January 7th, so I'd like to open it up to the public. So if there's anybody from the public that would like to, I don't know if there's a microphone up there, Steve.
Steve Olin, 52 Glandor Road, and associate member of the planning board. We just had the land use section read to you, and number L5 was to conduct a review of OSRD projects to see whether we can improve them based upon what we've had already. So we did have the senior residential one at the
Westwood Estates.
Clapper Street and the Westwood Lodge. So from that one, there were two things that did come up. I mentioned it before, as I just bring it up again. The question of lots abutting the street. It actually says that they have to follow the for dimension, for frontage and area. They have to follow the underlying zoning on those streets. I think we did see where the project could have been improved quite a bit if they didn't have to create these big giant lots, which are really outsized compared to what they were doing on the with the senior residences there. So if the planning board had the ability to waive that requirement and allow less frontage and less size lots, I think that should be put into the OSRD. The second item was how they count open space. It seems to be every time we have one of these, they're counting the backyards of people's of these units as part of the open space, and I don't think that's what was intended. That would really what we were calling open space. So I think those two items are right away we can do something with on the OSRD.
I think those are.
And one just further comment, Article 2 I was looking at, I really don't see the need for that. The Morrison Park is owned by the town and nothing's going to happen to it. There's no threat to it or anything like that. It seems to me that's just a, it's
housekeeping.
It's a solution looking for a problem.
It's housekeeping.
No, I don't think it's housekeeping because, nothing's going to happen to it, and it does include other properties. The FMUODs might, include other town properties. We're not, unless you're doing a whole scale review of the zoning on all the town properties. Just to pick that one out, I don't think is necessary.
You think the reason was that was pretty much the only one that was out of sorts compared to other uses.
But I still don't see, nothing's going to happen to it.
Yeah. No, your point's well taken.
And again, it's just, you have to go before the FinCom and all these and explain the reason for this. And I think it's just, wasting everyone's time.
Sure.
That's all.
That's fine. Any other comments? Sure.
Jack Wigan. I just wanted to pick up on what Dave and Bill were talking about in terms of the sustainability or the energy efficiency piece. Both the community facilities section of the new draft plan, and the sustainability section. The community facilities and sustainability section both touch upon the two things that you were talking about, the sort of the net zero efficiency and all town buildings having that. So you were talking about a resolution, Dave, and I would just say that the purpose of the plan in some ways is to capture these policy directions. So if you've got some stronger language than what we've seen in the draft policy so far in either one of those two sections, it might be a good place to begin to formulate that statement and put it in the plan at this point. So when that comes, that gets approved later or earlier in next year, you'll have that policy basis for doing exactly what you two are talking
So you're saying
about.
like having this stuff included in the plan is better or at least equal to going to the trouble of passing some resolution?
Yeah, sure.
Because the plan gets,
I don't know, though. I mean, I've seen previous comprehensive plans just not followed if you read them. So if it's important enough to pull out,
I'm not
just
saying-
for consideration.
It would be complementary to it. I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah.
saying, don't ignore the fact that
Yeah.
you've got an opportunity to craft whatever language you want to in your long-range plan, and it's your plan, so you might as well do that. You might as well put the language in it that you like to see it, and that's kind of the whole idea of this process. And then when you go before town meeting with a resolution, you can be pointing to the comprehensive plan that's been developed, and it's got language consistent with what you're talking about. It's all part of a way of developing and solid policy.
That's great. Thank you, Jack. Okay, great. So we can move forward to our next, and that's not a hearing, so we need to continue it.
Right.
Yeah, so next on the list, item 3, 141 Woodland Road, Eversource. If the applicant can come to the podium and for presentation.
Okay. What does that say? Is it working or no? One of these? Yeah, I can't.
Hi, I'm Mark Lamping with Eversource Energy. Here to talk about the Woodland Road Gate Station Replacement Project. This is Dwight Dunk with Epsilon Associates. We also have some people in the audience to support questions from our engineering firm Odin and some other Eversource folks. But go to slide 2. Sorry. So just high level, this station is a gas metering and regulator station, also known as a gate station. So just to give you a general idea, this is where gas is metered as it comes off the Algonquin system, and the amount of gas entering for residential and commercial use in town and the surrounding towns is regulated here by Eversource. So this is a shared facility with them for metering and regulating gas into our system. So Eversource owns 19 of these stations across Massachusetts and another 24 in Connecticut. They're generally located, along a transmission line and where we need them to serve the public. So that's kind of how they've come about, the locations. And this is an existing location that we plan to replace and upgrade. So big picture, high-level overview. So there has been some increased demand in the system since 1964 when the original station went in. We've also done some improvements around town to install gas mains to better network the 3 stations in the area. So we do need some increased capacity here to support that reliability improvement. And as a result, we want to make upgrades to the facility just to bring it up to more modern standards. More accurate metering, more accurate remote control and monitoring to improve safety, and that sort of. So the project objective from a town perspective really is we want to maintain gas service to the town during construction. So we do plan to leave the existing station online until the new station is complete. And then our objective really is to try to minimize impacts to the community as much as possible. So we'll go through this in a little bit more detail, but we're utilizing existing topography and vegetation along the front street line to try to shield the building. We've also picked the building color and appearance to try to blend in with the surrounding. And we're planting additional trees along the property lines to shield the facility from the abutters, and we're minimizing on-site construction time by utilizing prefabricated buildings. We'll prefabricate a lot of the piping off-site and more or less just assemble the station on-site to try to reduce the amount of on-site construction time.
Thank you, Mark. Again, my name is Dwight Dunk with Epsilon Associates. And what we wanted to do tonight was that obviously you received the package back in October. We have received a copy of the peer review comments that were based on the original submittal. That was with the plans that were dated. Oh, I guess this one takes
Sorry,
the.
it doesn't work on the.
Yeah, I just realized that. So this plan that's on the screen was the plan that was submitted in the package. Since then, Eversource, Odin, the engineers have been working with Enbridge, as well as we've been going through some of the other town boards, Conservation Commission, et cetera. And therefore, the plan has evolved a little bit since the September plan. And so what we want to do tonight, I think, is to stick to some larger overarching topics that were addressed in these detailed comments. We think that the revised plan addresses some of them, and then also talk with the board about what's the most efficient way to go through these comments with the peer reviewer, is also with Ms. McCabe, whether it's direct, if we can talk, communicate directly with the peer reviewer, or everything goes through the planning board. So if we can just continue on, but this revised site plan, the most noticeable items that you can see on the plan is a more evolved drainage system to comply with the state and town standards. The initial one was just more schematic to make sure that everything could fit on the site, as well as some additional screening trees. There's other details that at the scale is a little hard to read, but the plan has evolved since the September. Thanks. Yep. As I mentioned, we have the comments, and I think between now and the next hearing, which I think we're on the agenda for January 21.
Well, we haven't gotten there yet, but tonight, before the end of the evening, the planning board will have to take action and vote to continue the hearing. So
Okay.
my recommendation was to one of your January meetings.
Okay. But we could work between now and then to work through all the details. The overarching items that we saw kind of in the detailed was to minimize rock removal and site grading. And basically the plan has done that. I mean, that's truly a financial, economic item for Eversource, but it also understands we want to minimize the work on the site. So the plan that's been proposed really does minimize site grading and rock removal to the extent practicable. Another item talked about blasting and really trying to avoid blasting or minimize that. As the plan is being developed for the proposal for contractors, the engineers believe, based on the site conditions, that rock can be removed by mechanical means, and that's the intent, would be to remove it by mechanical means. There is I believe in the proposal to the contractors for the bidders is to blasting would not be prohibited. However, there are many steps along the way that would need to be done before blasting could be approved. Obviously, I'm sure that there's probably a town review and approval for blasting, but one of the other items that's here is truly the fact that there's an Enbridge natural gas transmission main, that this is the gate station too, so minimizing vibrations across the site is important too. So the intent here is to place sufficient obstacles to guide the contractors to mechanical removal, and everyone believes that's possible. Site screening and planting, as Mark mentioned, we have added some additional screening. We can certainly talk about the details of that in terms of species and structural diversity, shrubs, trees, etc. But one of the main points, the hill that's up at about elevation 253 between the existing building and Woodland Road is going to be maintained. The high point of that hill will still be maintained. The finished floor elevation of the closest building is about elevation 244. So that's a 9-foot difference. The buildings are about 10 feet high, 10 feet tall, 9 feet 10 inches. So generally they're screened by the topography and then the vegetation from the street, and then there'll be additional vegetation to the residences to the north and south. And the one that I want to focus on more is the constraints. So we can go to the next slide. This is the overall plot plan of the site. It shows it's about 1 acre. Just want to make sure I read that properly. Yep. 1.085. But as you can see, the Enbridge transmission line pretty much runs through the middle of it. The existing gate station is to the south. We have quite a few constraints, but that's a primary one. And with the piping and everything that currently goes to the south, trying to avoid having piping cross that existing natural gas line is one of the elements of the plan development. So that kind of keeps everything to the south. And if we go to the next slide, this really shows the when we start looking onto the constraints of the site, we've identified in blue the water resource overlay boundary that we're trying to keep all the buildings out of. This is the Enbridge right-of-way. The yellow dash identifies their southern boundary. This is the 35-foot setback from wetlands, trying to keep all the structures and buildings outside of that. And then we obviously have the front and side yard setbacks. So when we look at that, we really have a pretty constrained site in which to put this building in, put this new station in, and keep the existing station functioning while the new structure goes in. So in terms of the comment about trying to shift the building, if a few feet here or there, these constraints really show that the building, the new gate station structures have been installed and located, and there isn't much flexibility because of all these constraints to relocate it. Again, this is just that site plan, so showing how this works, and to put it into perspective, basically the existing gate station is down in this area here where the detention basin would be. One of the elements that the Conservation Commission had questions about that we need to submit to Karen, we have the drawing, was more of a sequencing plan to get to this point. During construction, the existing station would be maintained. This new work would be done, but during construction for erosion control, the proposed forebay, that would be the location of basically a construction stilling basin, so that drainage from this area would be directed to the stilling basin. A berm would be installed, a temporary berm would be installed along here to direct stormwater to the stilling basin. Once everything is built, the new station is demolished, then the rest of the drainage system would be built. Okay, next. And I guess we should have made the type a little larger, but I just wanted to quickly go over the local permits and approvals. The building and demolition permit application was submitted in October 7th. That was denied and referred to the ZBA for relief as a special permit. The special permit was submitted in November, special permit application. That hearing is scheduled for next week on the 18th. The EIDR is here. We had the notice of intent. The application was submitted on October 22. We had the hearing in November. The commission voted to close the hearing. It was just pending getting the Karen out there to review the boundary. That was scheduled and conducted this Monday. There's a couple of just those construction sequencing plans, and then she can issue the order of conditions. And then the stormwater management and land use, that's, you know, kind of coincident, concurrent with the order of conditions. So that really kind of, you know, we wanted to keep it as a brief presentation tonight, get input from the board in addition to these written comments. I think the revised plan will address a lot of these comments. And then just open it up. Oh, just one thing that I wanted to point out is in terms of the one of the photo that's here of the example of the proposed prefabricated buildings. That's not this site with a layout. This is a different site with similar buildings, so obviously the layout is a little different than here, but that gives you an idea of what the proposed buildings would look like in shape, scale, and color.
Great. Thank you. Deb, did you want to start with any questions?
Actually, I'd like to hear from the engineer.
Yeah, sure.
Tom.
Is Tom
Yep.
here?
You hired Tom Houston of PSC as your peer reviewer, and he's here tonight.
Oh,
He
that's great. I
provided
didn't see
your,
him in the audience.
comments. There he is.
Thank
So
you,
you
Tom.
received your comments last week, and they were also provided to the applicant.
Thank you, members of the board. Good evening. Tom Houston. We did a fairly detailed report and had a number of comments, but I think some of the more key comments fall into just a few areas. One is, this is going to be somewhat redundant with what the prior gentleman discussed, but one of the key issues certainly is earthwork, and a subset of that is the quantity of rock that needs to be excavated on the site. It is good news if, in fact, this rock can be mechanically excavated, but within that framework, I would hope that that is not a HORAM, which is quite intrusive in terms of noise and vibration. So perhaps more detailed information will reduce the amount of blasting, if any, that is required on the project. But it's a key issue because of the location of the site in the middle of an established residential neighborhood. If you stand on Woodland Road, there is a sharply sloped hill which is characterized by extensive bedrock outcrops, and that rises perhaps 20 feet above the street where you're standing. And unfortunately, the design cuts substantially into that bedrock hill. It is true that the peak of the hill remains in place, but there is some substantial rock excavation. I am more optimistic that an alternative can evolve which minimizes the amount of blasting. It may be possible, given all the constraints, there are wetlands, that's the location of the existing gas main, etc. But nonetheless, a small shift in the buildings, a slight rotation of the buildings, or maybe something as simple as reducing the amount of the excavation that's in the rear of the front building. In looking at the architectural plans, there are no doors or windows on the rear side of the building, yet there's substantial excavation, maybe 20 to 25 feet beyond that building face, and perhaps that can be reduced. So I'm reasonably optimistic that we can reduce the total quantity of bedrock. Related issues, of course, are the transport of earthwork and rock. The applicant estimates some 850 cubic yards of earthwork, most of which is going to be rock. That comes down to something like 50 or 60 truckloads of rock that have to be removed from the site. The site is in the middle of a residential area, so this construction truck traffic is going to have to pass through residential streets, probably Gloucester Road to Hartford Street to High Street. One of our comments was to request that the applicant work with Abby and with the police chief to identify a truck route that minimizes impacts and also to develop a plan of traffic controls, use of uniformed traffic officers during high traffic periods, etc. But nonetheless, the transport of earthwork is a significant issue on the site. Another key issue is that of screening and the proximity of the buildings and the stormwater basin to the southerly property line. The buildings are actually farther back on the site than the existing building, but the problem is, because of soil conditions, the stormwater basin wants to be near the southerly property line. So this entire facility is going to be highly visible, certainly from the adjacent residents and also from Woodland Road, for that matter. With respect to the buildings, the architectural plans are included in the application, and you can draw your own conclusions. But I think I characterized the buildings in our report as utilitarian and industrial in style, and not in harmony with the residential character of the neighborhood. So I would recommend that these buildings be looked at from an architectural point of view. They're rather large, precast concrete buildings, and they just don't seem to fit in a residential area. The third kind of major issue is that of soil conditions on the site. And the soil conditions, of course, affect the stormwater management approach to the site. The site is characterized by the Natural Resource Conservation Service as urban land, which fundamentally means they haven't classified it. The NRCS has not assigned what's called a hydrologic soil group to the site, and that HSG is critical in terms of forecasting the quantity of runoff that occurs on the site, and it also influences how quickly water infiltrates from the on-site stormwater basin into the ground. There are protocols set forth in the Stormwater Handbook that prescribe the nature of the testing that's required to establish the nature of on-site soils and also the HSG character at the location of the infiltration facility. And it's not for lack of trying. The applicant has actually done 6 different soil borings on the site, but every one of the soil borings has a different classification of soil in it. So the results in terms of the permeability of the soil are somewhat unclear at this point. The other issue is that of groundwater. The submitted analysis uses a groundwater elevation of 237, but for a number of reasons we believe that that is incorrect. For one thing, there are 2 soil borings, not in but reasonably near the infiltration basin, and they had actual groundwater logged at elevation 238.5, which is 1.5 feet above the elevation that was determined to be the high groundwater in the submitted calcs. That is of further concern because these borings were taken in September, and September is not a high groundwater season. So you would anticipate that during the high groundwater season, which is fundamentally January through the early spring, that the actual groundwater would be even higher. If it is at 238.5, and it won't be any lower than that, there's only a 6-inch separation between the bottom of the proposed infiltration basin and the observed groundwater elevation. Why that's a problem, if groundwater rises to the point where it's within 2 feet of the bottom of the basin, or even worse, touches the basin or intrudes into the basin, it significantly deters the ability of the basin to infiltrate water into the ground. So that 2-foot separation is pretty critical to maintain. And right now, it doesn't look like the current design maintains that 2-foot separation. There are some issues with the design of the basin itself. One of them being that the stormwater handbook specifies a 100-foot separation between an infiltration basin and a downslope building. There's actually a downslope residence about 50 feet away from the basin, and the basin needs to be 100 feet away from that residence. The slopes in the basin are a bit steeper than they're supposed to be. They're 2 to 1, they should be 3 to 1. There's supposed to be an access road around the basin. The discharge from the basin appears to encourage stormwater trespass onto the adjacent properties. So there are a number of issues here. I'm sure we can work through many of them by communicating with the engineers. But there are some policy issues which I think the board should consider, among them the screening and the aesthetics of the property. So I think those are our key comments on the project.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
So, Tom, just for clarification, so screening, you were talking about this at the southern property. You're saying because of the catch basin there.
Yeah, the problem is that they are respecting the 20-foot setback along the property line, which is fine, but there is just a single row of trees here. I know the zoning bylaw speaks to opaque fencing and a dense planting of evergreens. I think that can be sort of refined. I mean, I think you'd probably want the opaque fence. You'd probably want a double row of evergreen trees. You'd probably want some shrubs in the foreground to take care of the lower level of screening. I think you might try some underplanting in this existing wooded area so that you get some additional screening below the existing trees. So the words of the zoning bylaw I think are sufficient, but the details of how that's executed I think will have a significant effect on how effective the screening can be in that location. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think so. Tom raised the point of aesthetics. So what are the other options for considering this is the location of this?
Yeah, we can make the building facade different. I think the intent was, because there will be so much vegetation and topography screening it, the intent was to make it blend in with trees and natural colors. I mean, if when these are more visible, we do put like a red brick facade on the outside of the building, but we didn't think that was, and that's something we can do if the town wants, but we didn't think that was practical because, you know, if your eye does catch through the trees or any vegetative screening, it's going to kind of stick out. So our thought was to make it blend in more. Yeah. We are flexible as far as.
And Tom, is that what you were thinking when you were talking about aesthetics?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to represent that I'm an architect. I'm not.
No, I know, but I didn't know that if you have seen the ways that, because it's.
Yeah, I mean, even the existing building that's there. Well, for one thing, it's smaller, of course, but it is brick clad. It's been there for a while, so it sort of looks like it belongs there. Sort of blends in. Actually the illustrations that came in the package were more intrusive than the buildings that are being shown there. There was sort of an orange color and that type of thing. So I think it's an architectural treatment of the facade. I believe the mass of the buildings has to be what they are proposing because of functional reasons. So I think cladding or doing other architectural elements may make it appear to be more residential in scale.
I see. Okay. Debbie or Dave, does either of you
Is that the only design for the prefab? Are there other choices that could be looked at, or?
Yeah, so the outside of the building, it's a precast building. They can do like a stucco finish. I think maybe we could look at something like that, because then we could still make it a more neutral color. There are stamped brick options, but I feel like that's, usually that becomes red and it really sticks out and it's more apparent. I think maybe the idea would be to, the best I could think to do is to do a stucco finish just so it would blend in, because the whole purpose was to put trees, and if you do happen to be able to see through some of the trees and the building catches your eye, we want to make it, not stand out. But
Do you have any photos, though, that you could show? I mean, obviously not now, but.
yeah, we
Thank you.
Want to note if you maybe just go back to the site plan
Okay. In your presentation, or?
in the presentation, yeah.
Where is it?
Yeah, one of the things that, just in terms of the view shed of the building, as I was mentioning, this is the existing high point on the site. This is the driveway where you have a sight line kind of down the driveway. So there's no building, that would be visible from the road down the sight line of the driveway. Again, we have the height and the vegetation to the east from Woodland Road in Gloucester. But, from the south, from the residents on the south, the residents to the north. So we've tried to include those screenings to the north and south of it, the vegetation to block that. So that, I think, in terms of the, the precast being visible from the street, I think would be very unlikely. I'm not going to say it's not impossible, but probably unlikely. It's probably more likely from the abutters, and that's why the proposed screening is from those budding residential lots.
Okay. Dave?
So the gate station, that's where the gas enters, or the methane enters from the high pressure line, and then from there it's to all of the local Westwood, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like an interchange off the highway to a secondary road. So yeah, that's where.
And so will this enhancement or expansion, will that allow a greater volume of methane into the?
Yeah, we did design with, we don't see a ton of additional growth in the Westwood area, but we did consider that in sizing equipment.
So I'm wondering are you aware of the current number of unrepaired gas leaks in Westwood? As I know as of last year, there were 36 gas leaks, most of them in the Downey School area and Islington part of town.
Yeah, I'm not in the group that services the distribution system. I'm more involved in the stations. We are aware of the leaks. I know our leaks are generally graded. We have class 1 leaks that are repaired immediately because they propose a risk to the public, and then we have class 2 and 3 leaks that are monitored. So those repairs do tend to take longer.
I know there's been.
Does this change the pressure into the?
No, this really doesn't affect how the distribution system is going to operate in the street.
So I guess my concern is the overall environmental impact, that if you're increasing the size of the station, its capacity to handle more volume, and you have a lot of leaks in the network, then it will increase the exposure of residents. It'll increase the amount of methane that's released into the atmosphere. It seems like you should patch the leaks before expanding the station.
The pressure coming out of the station will maintain the same, so the amount of gas that is released through any existing leaks would stay the same, because it's really a function of the pressure in the pipe.
So it maintains, the station manages it regulates the pressure down from the high pressure. I mean, what about the safety concerns of if you do have to do blasting? Isn't that inherently dangerous around it?
Yeah. We Eversource and Enbridge have policies about blasting around gas mains, and we review all the blast plans to make sure that the vibration limits are maintained below acceptable levels.
All right. I think mean, I'll just continue to have concerns about those issues, but if other people want to ask questions.
Hey, Chris?
What are the trees as you go up the hill from Woodland Road? Are they deciduous, pine, evergreen? What?
It's mostly deciduous.
Okay. So currently, right now, I didn't have an opportunity to drive by it. Currently, right now, it's other than the incline, you can see all the way into the area. It looks like, to me, reading this, it looks like it's 11 or 12 feet from the road. It looks like it's 239, and then the highest number I see is maybe, I guess, 252.
Yes, 253 is the high point.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 14 feet, give or take.
And as I mentioned in the presentation, the building, the closest building is at finished floor elevation is 244. It's about 10 feet tall, so that brings it up about 254. So it's
So you're not proposing any screening from Woodland Road view?
with the pretty dense vegetation. If we go to the last slide
So
of the
what about
presentation.
some of these photos? Do these help? These are the existing photos that were
Yeah.
of the site?
Yeah. Yeah, those are all closer.
Okay, wait.
I was going to say on the last slide of the presentation is an aerial oblique.
Yeah, from the aerial that I've seen, it just looks dense.
Right, it's dense.
But that's dense in July.
Correct.
So 6 months a year, it's dense.
Yeah.
The other 6, not so much. So that's why I was asking, you're not proposing to do any screening from the Woodland Road perspective. There's none now, I get that.
Yeah.
But you have a much smaller building that you're trying to
Correct.
obscure from view. Since we're talking about aesthetics, is it at this time perhaps you're looking to maybe alter or improve the gate at the end of the road? Because that is not in keeping with the residential area.
Yeah, we do plan to replace that gate. We also got a phone call from one of the neighbors that asked if we could push the gate into the station a little bit further, so
Make
it's
it look
not
like a
right at the
driveway
roadway.
instead of a.
Yeah, so we are going to
That's
replace the gate with a swing gate
It
and
looks
pull
like
it
the
further
Addams
into the
family
station.
lives there now. So that would be helpful to the residents nearby also. Do you see any issues with what our peer review consultant has brought up? Do you have any issues? He is our voice. He's our expert in this, not us. Do you see any issues complying with any of his concerns?
Well,
I would expect you to hammer them out right here and now,
Yeah.
but in the future, moving forward.
No, I think we could work through it. I mean, I think we can add additional screening along the southern line, double lower right of trees, and look at some lower screening as well. The building facade, I guess that's something we're gonna have to discuss if it's worth trying to make it look more like a residential home, or if it's more worth making it kind of blend into the environment. And we'll have to look at the soil conditions and the stormwater management design. We can't speak to that now.
All right, well, I look forward to hearing whatever the two of you can hash out in terms of a solution for all those issues, but.
Bill?
I just, one question, Guy. You're going to work during business hours, no nights, no weekends?
Yeah, we were going to comply with the local building, whatever the building permit restrictions were for building hours.
Okay, we might be hammering away at that rock. I know it gets pretty loud and irritates people in certain areas, so I would think that you'd want to do that at particular hours.
Right, we have the town's general bylaw on construction, I think is at 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and then noon to 7 on Sundays.
So we can't ask them to not do it on Sundays and maybe a half a day on Saturday or something like that. I'm just thinking of the neighbors that.
Yeah, we don't have any plans to work on Sundays. As far as
Double or triple time to whoever you hire?
Great, and then any public comment? Sure. You can just go up to just make a line at the podium. Yeah, speak at the microphone, please.
I'm Kathleen Sukma. I live at 130 Woodland Road, and my husband was on the planning board for 9 years, so I appreciate all that you're doing here because now I realize what he did. I have lots of concerns about this site development. One, I never received a package from the gas company. My driveway looks right down at the gas line. As far as blasting is concerned, when there was new construction in our neighborhood, there was a lot of blasting because there's a lot of ledge in the area, and I had damage done to my house. Another thing is I do not want to be able to see these buildings from my house, so I'm hoping your site development will be more than adequate to cover the two buildings. I do not know why there are two buildings. I have not been to a previous meeting, nor do I have any paperwork about the development. I don't think a concrete building would blend in very well with the environment. And then we also have, as of recent times, a lot of traffic coming up Gloucester Road. And that's because people have found that access route to bypass the center of town. So anytime there's going to be construction there, you're going to have to either reroute that traffic or maybe change the sign that it could only be one way at a certain time of day to avoid. Woodland Road is just wide enough for one car. So those are my concerns, and I would like to be apprised of any information that the gas company is going to be doing and to give us updates of what the buildings look like. And that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Nice job, Kathy. My name is Steve Howe. I live on 10 Gloucester Road, so I'm kind of, so my front door kind of faces that gate. So, you know, I have some concerns. I have 2 young children and a baby in the belly, my wife's belly. So definitely we're not looking forward to the construction. Maybe we can accept it, but obviously we have some safety concerns if there's a lot of traffic of, you know, construction vehicles and so forth. Looking at the schematics previously, I mean, I'm not an expert, but it does look like the buildings are moved closer to the road, and therefore, I know there's in the schematics some, I'm not sure what's called, but I guess the artificial vegetation created a screen from the abutters, but I think the buildings become more visible to us on Gloucester Road and Woodland, so that's obviously concerning. If you've been in the area, it's a you know, it's a residential neighborhood with a lot of kids, and I think there's the potential of really kind of changing the complexion of the area, and that's obviously concerning to us. So I think those are my comments. And by the way, I really appreciate the work of the board. It's interesting hearing a lot of the concerns that were raised were actually the concerns that, you know, we had in preparation for this. So thank you.
Well, before you begin, I wanted to make sure, as Steve pointed out about the children, there are 12 young children on that street.
Great, thank you.
Young, about maybe the oldest being 6 or 7. So we are concerned about that.
Hi, I'm Dina Moran. I live at 14 Gloucester Road. I live right next to Steve. So my primary concern coming tonight was the view. Chris, as you mentioned, looks like the Adams family lives there, and it truly does. When I moved in 25 years ago, it did not look like that. There was no fence up, and I didn't even know there was a utility station there. And then NSTAR, I think it was at the time, came in and put the fence up. I don't think there was any review of it. They had fluorescent signs on the fence. Kathy's husband and Dave Lang across the street from me did a lot of complaining and did some work and got the signs toned down. So it's looked like that for a period of time and is pretty unacceptable in our neighborhood. So my hope is with this project, if it goes forward, that will be much improved so that it doesn't look like there's an industrial park with a nuclear site at the end of our street, because that's kind of what it looks like right now. So that's my concern. I know in the plans it was talking about screening to the north and the south for the neighbors that are right next door, but Steve and I and our other neighbors have a view driving up Gloucester Road. So screening there is really important, especially if these buildings are going to be larger and more visible. I also hadn't considered the blasting, but that certainly is a concern. Kathy mentioned that there was damage to her house with previous blasting. I also have the same concern. My house is 70 years old. It was built post-World War II. It's not rock solid, so a lot of blasting and things like that is going to be a concern to me. Buildings, again, if they're visible at all, they should be, as was mentioned before, they should be in keeping with the neighborhood and not look like an industrial site. Stormwater, there's discussion of stormwater. I don't know what this building will do to affect how water moves in the neighborhood. I drove down Conant Road this morning, which is not related to this, but they built a new house on Conant Road, and now there is a pond in the middle of Conant Road after it rains. So something like that, there was not water there before, and there is now. So those kind of things happen and crop up where you don't expect them. And then lastly, whatever gets approved, I would strongly request that whoever can hold Eversource to doing what they commit to do would be really important, because my experience just with the fence that went up before, there was very little the neighbors could do about that. So if this project were to move forward, making sure that they truly do what they commit to do, and that whatever screening and plants that are put in place truly do the job that they're intended to do, and they're not just put up to say, yes, we put up some trees. And I think that's pretty much my comments.
Great,
thank you.
And does the applicant, one more? Sure.
I agree with Jack Wagon, 55 Gloucester Road. I agree with a lot of the things that were said, particularly by the peer review consultant. A couple of things. The fence that's here now is really was put in there post 9/11, I think, and it's really a security fence. There's no attempt to screen anything with that fence. It's a chain link fence, I think. And I think what they're talking about now is a screening fence. So I'm wondering what the relationship is between the security fence and then the screening fence. And then whether that screening fence, whether they would propose to put it on top of that rise that everybody is talking about that's in front of the building, because that would just make it another 8 feet taller than that. So I'd be curious about the location of the screening fence versus the security fence. Another issue, no one's talked about lighting yet, and I assume that there'll be some security lighting there, and so I'd really like to know what the nature of that lighting is, what time it would come on and off, how tall it is, where it would point at, and all that kind of thing. And then another issue that probably stems from my having been in that neighborhood for so long is that there, and I don't know if this is even possible, and it's unclear to me how much property Eversource owns there. Do you own the whole triangular part? We used to, people used to be able to access Hale Reservation from the end of Gloucester Road, crossing Woodland Road, and you could go right into Hale from that location. Then when the security fence was put up, that was no longer possible. But I do see that they own property that, at least at this point in time, isn't fenced in. And I'm wondering what reaction they would have to allowing a public access path to cross somewhere over there to get further along the gas line.
Can you gesture to where you're referring?
So the gas line runs along here, the right-of-way, the easement, and you used to be able just to walk right through here. That
So
building
up
was
the driveway, so to speak?
Up the driveway, and then it just continues along as a cleared right-of-way. It goes up and down, up and down. Eventually, you come to Hale, and there's a gate here and fencing all around, chain link fencing, and it goes somewhere in here. I don't know where it is, but that would be a nice asset for the people in the neighborhood. That's my only
And
comments.
there is a path within Hale that starts up there?
Yes, there's one that tees at the end of that gas line.
And then I'd like to give the applicant an opportunity to respond to any questions or comments, or have any closing remarks.
Yeah, so at this time, always we took notes. We'll, I think as far as a visual, I think maybe we can provide some better graphics to demonstrate how well we're visually screening it. I know that seems like a very everyone's concern. As far as the gate, the gate, we will address the gate, and we will put that in the in our design to push the gate further into the property and improve the aesthetics of it. Accessing Hale Road, that's something I have to look into. But yeah, I think we have some things we have to look into and address.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sure. Just grab the mic. Thanks.
As I mentioned earlier, I don't have any responses, rebuttals to topics that came up. I think we can work through those. But in terms of the logistics or coordination for working through those, going forward over the next couple of weeks with the gentleman who provided the peer review and with you, Abigail, and for the Eversource team, what's the most time-efficient way to do that?
So I think I would recommend working in between the meeting with myself, staff. Holly's also here from Beta Group as our acting town engineer, and Tom. We can work together to review your plan revisions in advance of the next meeting. I know there was and then when you have your completed revised package, the planning board would request a written summary summarizing your changes with revised plans, and then I would also get those to the planning board in their in their electronic packets and posted on our website. I know there's a question in the audience. I can hand out my card, but when the planning board gets revised submission, we do post it on the planning board's webpage so that anyone of the abutters can see the revised plan in advance of the next meeting. So tonight, the planning board will vote to continue your hearing to January. So I think in between that meeting, Tom and staff and we can work with you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Could you be able to say, if you don't have to blast, about how long is this process, first shovel in the ground to last? But I mean, I'm not going to hold you to it. I'm just curious.
Yeah, so we haven't gotten a contractor on board and gotten a confirmed schedule. Our plan is to start in April, and I think worst case we would wrap up by November. I think that's a conservatively long estimate, but I don't want to say something shorter.
Okay.
Any final comments from other board members? Seeing none, do you want to make a motion?
Make a motion to continue the public hearing to Tuesday, January 21st at 7 p.m. at Carvey Street to allow time for the applicant to submit revised plans as requested by the peer reviewer and staff.
We have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? So, thank you.
Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you.
And I have a hard stop at 9:45, so next on the agenda is 405 Nahanton Street, Earth Material. Good evening. And you can start when you're ready.
My name is Joyce.
Oh, and just if you can continue the conversations in the hallway, that'd be great. Thank you. We can hear you.
My name is Joyce Hastings. I'm from GLM Engineering, and I'm representing Rosario Paparazzo. This is for the.
I think we're ready. Thank you for your patience.
This is for the construction of a single-family dwelling at 405 Nahanton Street. This is an undeveloped parcel of land that contains 3.68 acres. There's a large majority of wetlands along the rear, so we have proposed the house in the front corner, in the front southeast corner of the property. Of the 3.68 acres, we're developing just a little bit over half an acre, 28,000 square feet. We're proposing a single-family dwelling with a driveway, proposed driveway. We have proposed stormwater for roof infiltration, and a stone trench along the end of the driveway. We filed an application for earth material movement, because what we were proposing to do is to bring in 924 cubic yards of material, a combination of stone under the, there's about 100 yards of gravel under the driveway, about 60 yards of stone under the foundation and along the trench at the end of the driveway and for the roof recharge. And then we have about 760 yards of loam around the foundation. This particular site has high groundwater. Keeping the foundation just at the ground surface, basically. So that's what's the majority of the fill will go around the front of the house to screen the foundation from the front, and then it will wrap around the side of the house. All activity will come from one driveway opening. We're putting in a stone construction entrance, about 34 feet of crushed stone in the first part of the driveway, so that all trucks go in and out that area. The driveway will be swept daily as necessary, or more often as necessary. The street in front of the driveway, so that the road is kept clear. Erosion control barriers will be wrapped around the edge of the limit of the project. This is required, but partly because the back half of the property is within the 100-foot buffer zone, and also to contain the project so that we don't go beyond the limits of the area that we're proposing to disturb. We've gone through conservation. We have an order of conditions issued from them. Included in that was the stormwater contingent on, we have a stormwater proposed. We're also planting 34 trees around the area as required for disturbance in the buffer zone.
Thank you. Did you say that that they requested a stormwater report?
We proposed stormwater roof infiltration. We did soil testing and proposed to infiltrate the roof runoff.
And did
It
Conservation
wasn't
Commission?
required. This is a single-family dwelling, so stormwater report isn't required, but we did prepare one to show them what was going on.
And so what was their response?
They accepted it.
Okay, thank you. Do you have anything else for your presentation? Okay, thank you. Dave?
So I'm just confirming, I'm looking at the plan, like none of those trees are in the town right of way, like they're outside of the issue is that there is a potential for a sidewalk along there, but I just wanted to see that those
So
trees.
there's a stone wall is the property line along the front of this
Okay,
property.
yeah, I see that
And the
now.
majority of the trees fall behind that. We're not proposing to take down any trees in the right-of-way, but as far as activity, that's the only thing we're doing is the driveway in the right-of-way.
Great. Debbie? Chris?
None.
Bill? Yeah, I don't have anything either. So, Abby, is there anything from staff for this?
No specific comments. I know Holly's here. She's been here all night. She's here in Phil's place. She reviewed the plans on behalf of Beta and provided a memo that was in your packet and provided to the applicant as well. So I just have in your meeting package tonight the 5 waivers that are requested, and I recommend 10 of your standard conditions. I may have sent these to you late this afternoon if you had a chance to review them. Do you want me to just briefly summarize?
I'm sure, yes.
them?
Thank you.
So the 10 conditions would be the applicant is responsible for completion of the project within a reasonable time frame, compliant with the approved project plans. The existing pavement on Manhattan Street shall be protected from damage. The crushed stone entrance shall be cleaned as needed. The Department of Public Works shall be contacted during the installation and backfill of the infiltration chambers so they can be available for inspection. All trucks, so usually you look at where the truck routes are. And this one, my suggestion is all trucks carrying the fill shall enter the property site really from Manhattan Street. I'm not sure where the dirt is coming from, so I would guess it would be from, I recommend High Street or Clabbertree Street from the east, not taking the left onto Clabbertree Street there at that turn.
Right.
If that works.
And they come up Manhattan through Norwood?
Yeah. So from Manhattan Street, but not, I guess, limiting it
Right.
so it's not going left onto Clabbertree Street.
Yeah,
I
that's a
guess.
tough left. Yeah, I agree.
And then 6 is, I think the applicant said he didn't know where the fill was coming from at this time in your
Not yet, no.
application. So typically, we'd have a condition that there be a certification submitted that there's no hazardous material contamination in the fill be provided before issuing a building permit and before any earth were to come to the site. So that would be provided to me to that I would verify after this approval. And then the last 3 are related to condition 7 related to the construction hours. The applicant's responsible for completing any other filings, and the applicant is responsible for repairing any damage within the public way with prior approval and coordination with the Department of Public Works.
Great, thank you. And did you have anything additional to share? Okay, great. And then any comments from the public? Seeing none. And then the waivers are the 5 waivers here. So stormwater, it seems like Conservation Commission has dealt with that. Does any board member have any issues with the waivers on exterior lighting plan, traffic study, presentation model, drainage, stormwater report, or drawings and renderings? No. Okay. So just have a motion. Is the first motion to
Approve the waivers? Yeah. Make a motion to approve the 4 waivers just listed?
do we have a second?
5 waivers.
5, sorry. Forgot about that.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained? So that passes. The next is the, to approve the project with the conditions. So,
I make a motion to approve the earth material movement special permit,
EIDR.
sorry, EIDR, to include the conditions listed by Abby earlier.
do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed and abstained? So that passes. And then do we need to close the hearing? So motion to close the hearing.
I make a motion to close the hearing.
Do we have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained, the hearing is closed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So of the other items on the agenda, the street release 600 Clapper Tree, is that?
Nope, it's not ready. We didn't get that back.
And then approval of minutes. Did everybody have a chance to review the minutes?
I had 2 in your
This is,
packet over
I'll
the
just wait till I come.
weekend. September 17th, October 1st, and then October 22nd I added last night, if you had a chance to review.
Yeah, so I reviewed 2.
Oh, sorry, not October 10th, October 1st and October 22nd.
So I reviewed October 1st and, yep, and September 17th. And what do we have listed here? I just don't want to approve some.
22 as well.
October 22nd, I added them maybe around 4 o'clock yesterday, so if you had a chance to review them.
September 17th, October 1st. Yeah, so the ones listed on the agenda I reviewed. Why don't we give Chris a second? It wasn't here the 17th. Okay. So did everybody review October 1st? So I make a motion to approve the minutes from October 1st.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? So that, we approve those minutes.
And the 17th, Chris wasn't here?
No,
Right.
Chris wasn't here the 17th of September.
Oh, yeah, okay.
17th.
So you could This is the September 17th.
Okay, so I make a motion to approve September 17th. Second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? So that passes. So October 1st, we just approved 4-0. Chris was here for that.
The minutes?
Yep.
For the
Oh,
minutes.
yeah,
Okay.
I would include a yes on that, sorry.
And so I make a motion to close the meeting.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Meeting's closed.